Let's talk about behavior change. Maybe you believe change happens by acting like a different kind of person. That change is about superficially adopting new behaviors or identities without deeper choice or agency. Or that character is something fixed inside you, like a trait waiting to be uncovered or perfected. I suggest we begin from a different premise. You are not your character. You are your choices. Character is the shadow cast by your most consistent choices. In this episode, we'll explore the arc of transformation that defines Stoic Strength Training, embodying the choosing self to train the conditioned self to be more consistent with the preferred self. This isn't a game of pretend or a shallow personality makeover. It's a practical shift to a more effective way of building better habits and reactions. It's the process of becoming the person who makes the kinds of choices you admire, and not by wishing, but by doing what's required. Hey there, it's me, Core, and you're listening to Exercising Self-Control from Fitness to Flourishing. The conditioned self runs most of your life. According to estimates, as much as 90% or more. It's fast, automatic, and efficient, but not necessarily aligned with your preferred values. It's the sum of your past reinforcement, habits, emotional reflexes, fears, comforts, and learned responses. When stress spikes, when you're tired, when you're surprised, when you're triggered, the conditioned self acts first. Not because it is, in quotes, you, but because it is faster than you and your ability to think consciously. This is why someone can meditate for 5 years and still snap at their child. Why someone can be disciplined with their eating for months and still find themselves binge eating. Why someone can be honest for decades and still lie under pressure. The conditioned self is not malicious. It's simply the non-conscious responses set in motion by the circumstances. You don't choose those responses. They happen to you, so to speak. The conditioned self-dominance is marked by reacting before thinking, emotional reflex overriding intention, habits firing without conscious awareness, and the choosing self, that is, the executive functions in the brain, being inhibited during high-intensity moments. In the early stages of your training, making the excellent choice in the moment can be rare, not because you're not aware of the better choice, but because you may not understand how best to train yourself. The first goal of training is not to catch yourself in the heat of the moment. That's not how the brain operates. The conditioned self is too fast, too powerful. Instead, you create more moments in which you exercise virtuous self-control before the circumstances demand a response. In other words, you'll take the time to set the standard for a better response before it's needed. This is the response you prefer the conditioned self will enact when, not if, it's triggered by the circumstances. Your ability to exercise virtuous self-control is most effective in planning, in setting an intention for a future event. Under duress, the conditioned self takes over. It's only when you can think objectively, deliberately, and with enough time to remain rational that the choosing self can function. This is the beginning of transformation. Okay, that's the conditioned self, but what happens when we aim to direct our experience? The choosing self is the core of Stoic strength. It's the faculty of volition, the part of you capable of conscious direction. It's the only place where virtue exists, because virtue is nothing more than the act of choosing well in the present moment. The choosing self directs your training by setting the standard for your personal excellence. That's sorting out your highest values and clarifying your most important goals. Also, in shaping your behavior. That's crafting intentions, reinforcing choices consistent with your standards, and redirecting choices inconsistent with your standards. It's determining principles aligned with effective action and creating space between stimulus and non-conscious response. When the choosing self becomes dominant, behavior shifts from reactive to deliberate. You begin to say things like, when I feel anger rising, then I choose to take a breath and count to 10. Or, when I notice I'm procrastinating, then I choose to ask myself, what's the next easiest step I can take to move this project forward right now? Or, when I find myself distracted, then I go to my project list to get back on track. This is the stage where you start living your values instead of merely believing in them. The choosing self shapes the conditioned self. It directs and retrains it. This stage is effortful. It requires attention, energy, and conscious engagement. You are choosing the program of your conditioning. The goal here is consistency, not perfection. Each chosen action becomes a vote for the person you prefer to be. Each repetition lays down new conditioning. This is how the preferred self becomes the standard. The preferred self is not an idealized fantasy, but rather a guiding template, a model of the person you aspire to be. It's important to understand that the preferred self is never fully realized as a fixed state. In practice, the only selves that exist in lived experience are the choosing self and the conditioned self. The preferred self serves as a blueprint, an aspiration. When aspects of the preferred self are realized through repeated choosing self decisions, they become integrated into a new iteration of the conditioned self. In other words, the conditioned self is the actual trained identity, shaped over time by the choices you make in alignment with the preferred self. This distinction clarifies that transformation is not about fully becoming a separate, idealized self, but about continuously training your conditioned self through deliberate choice. The conditioned self, rebuilt through thousands of choosing self decisions, is the version of you that acts automatically in alignment with your values because you have trained yourself to do so. This is the stage where discipline feels natural, honesty is instinctive, patience is reflective, courage is habitual, and personal excellence is the default response. The preferred self remains a living template, guiding ongoing growth and refinement. Importantly, the choosing self does not become redundant here. It shifts focus slightly from active direction to ongoing consent. You continue to choose your established habits by choosing not to change them. You maintain your identity through subtle, continuous approval and reinforcement of your own automatic behaviors. This is moral progress, not the elimination or absence of choice, but the realization the conscious choice has become second nature. The preferred self is the embodiment of your highest values in action, as manifested in a fully congruent conditioned self. This is the arc of transformation. The full arc goes like this: conditioned self to choosing self to preferred self. When the conditioned self is dominant, it might say something like, I react. When the choosing self is dominant, it might say something like, I notice, evaluate, and choose. And the preferred self, in its prestige position, might say something like, I set the standard for personal excellence in any circumstance. This arc is not linear. You'll move back and forth between these modes depending on stress, fatigue, context, and practice. It's also not flat. You can move either upward or downward. When you move upward, you're creating a virtuous spiral. When you move downward, you're creating a vicious spiral. This is the path of Stoic Strength Training. Not becoming virtuous, but making the virtuous choice until it becomes a pattern of being. Even having established a pattern, the choice remains. That is your opportunity. You don't need to fix your character. You don't need to act like a better person. You don't need to change your nature. You only need to recognize your moments of choice, exercise virtuous self-control in those moments, and repeat until the preferred behavior becomes conditioned. Your character will take care of itself. Here's what you can do today. Look for a moment in which you can exercise virtuous self-control. One moment where you can pause, recognize the choice in front of you, and deliberately choose in alignment with who you want to be. That moment of choice, that's the arc of transformation beginning. That's the spiral being set in motion. You can move yourself upward or downward. The choice, as always, is yours. That's it for today. Catch you next time.